city bonuses, because as we write out and as we look at project by project, the reality is that there's not that many projects that are really going to benefit from it. It still is an expensive proposition for developers, so I think we will see some of it. Right now, the state law is in effect in this city, and anybody could take advantage of it right now. And we have had a few, but not a lot. So I do not expect, once that ordinance is adopted, that we're going to see massive changes, but we will see selectively some developers taking advantage of it. And I do think that we should be careful and try to make it as moderate as we can.
All right. There's a lot of talk right now about our Sherman Oaks community plan being rewritten because it's one of 35. We would just like to know, when is that scheduled to start and how much of a public process this is going to be?
Well, I can tell you that every community plan is going to have a huge public process. The ones that we're working on now, there will literally be hundreds of public meetings, because it will be in the end your plan. And so there will be a massive amount of public input. Exactly what the schedule is for new plans coming online has not been absolutely determined yet. The City Council will help us decide how what the schedule is. And I do believe that we establish some criteria based on age of plan and development pressure to provide them with some preliminary lists. I don't have it with me, but I'll be happy to look and at least tell you what our recommendation was. But again, that hasn't been determined yet.
All right. As you know, we recently discovered there's $6 million worth of money sitting in for Ventura Boulevard traffic improvements. Jerry Silver, who's Homeowners of Encino president, could not be here tonight, but he asked that I ask this question of you. Will you support an immediate moratorium on development on Ventura Boulevard until the misuse of development fees have been examined and until an accurate tally of development and traffic problems can be made?
A moratorium is a very special legal use of the law that is based on safety and based on health and safety, and I do not believe that we could make the findings. I don't believe that we could make the findings to support a moratorium based on that particular issue, because I think that while I think it's horrendous, and I think that we were all surprised also, and I want to take personally some responsibility in the planning department. I believe that the planning department was supposed to provide some sort of reporting on that we did not do, and I want to take responsibility for that and to tell you that while we don't have the ability actually to spend the money or to make those decisions, I do believe that we have a responsibility to sit down with the transportation department, and I actually had my first conversation today with the head of transportation, and we are going to sit down. I do want to take our responsibility and help as much as we can to get that issue dealt with and to get that money spent on the projects that it was supposed to take care of.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from a gentleman that traveled from San Pedro, Andrew Martisich, and he asks, setting aside the fact that San Pedro's Ponte Vista high-density residential project would tax the city of Los Angeles' already strapped budget, the Fashion Square Mall expansion and this project have a common thread. Both developers are asking for massive zoning variances. What this gentleman would like to know, seeing how that Councilmember Brule has put forth the motion about getting more of a complete and accurate picture to gauge traffic studies and impacts, do you support the use of the national trip standards, and would you recommend that the draft EIRs be deferred pending an adoption of the national trip standards?
I supported Councilmember Brule's direction to the transportation department to go out and do some studies to determine whether or not our actual trip generation was within a close proximity of the national trip generation standards that we use. Frankly, I don't know that any of us know for sure whether we are generating more or less traffic, because frankly, I'm not sure exactly how they average all of the national rates. But I will tell you that in San Diego, we did create our own local trip generation rates that we used to project traffic in San Diego. We did find that, and I think we're probably a bit comparable, we did find that for a lot, or for some of the larger projects, the retail projects, we were actually producing more trips than the national standard. So I certainly support that effort, and I am really interested in what the results would be. And the second part of that question was, would I support a moratorium again on those two projects?
No. What the gentleman is after is that there are many projects right now in the very early stages of the environmental review process, and it seems to be rather a shame to let those projects go forward, knowing that the city could very well be revising the environmental review processes that would benefit more to the communities rather than the developers right now. And so the general concern, and obviously this association shares that, is that meanwhile, while the city studies and then makes its recommendations, many of these large-scale developments are going to be completed.
But we don't know in advance of the study. We honestly don't know whether we're going to find that we are producing more trips, and these projects are not all retail. I mean, Ponte Vista is essentially a residential project, and it could well be the case that we find our numbers are less than the national average. So I would not hold up projects today based on that single issue. I do believe that in both cases, both Ponte Vista, where you're looking at upzonings consistent with some community policies, and where you're looking at a similar issue at Fashion Square, that we need to look very critically at those projects, and there needs to be a lot of public input into those projects. So I certainly support a very vigorous public scrutiny and input on the projects, but I would be reluctant to hold up projects awaiting that study.
Well, it's not holding up projects, it's just they're in the early stages of the environmental review. So what's, if it takes a little bit longer,
it would depend again on what transportation comes back and tells us how long it's going to take for them. I have no idea what those studies involve.
Okay, some of the questions are of a general concern about the amount of increased density Sherman Oaks Pacific. Many of the residents, Jane Lip here writes that she's lived in Sherman Oaks for over 30 years. In your view, is progress more important than history?
And have I stopped beating my dog? Yeah. There is no good answer to that. I will tell you that this city is going to grow. It's going to grow whether you want it to grow or not. It's going to grow whether we plan for it or not. And I think it's better to plan for it. I believe in this huge, diverse city that we have plenty of opportunities to accommodate growth in a way that can increase the quality of life in certain neighborhoods and in certain transit